Just want to say good afternoon and welcome. We're so glad to have you join us this afternoon for our teacher training on supporting diverse learning needs. This is focused on building accessibility in EAL programs with tools, supports, and approaches. And we want to gratefully acknowledge today our funding from the province of British Columbia through the Ministry of Post-Secondary Education and Future Skills. I want to start us off in a good way today with a land acknowledgement. As a provincial umbrella association, AMSA acknowledges that BC is on the unceded homelands of First Nations who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. We recognize the privilege that we have as settlers on this land and acknowledge that AMSA's operations are on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. As an organization, AMSA is committed to creating a safe space for Indigenous voices. Today, I want to recognize the curriculum writing team, the partners who are part of the BC Safe Haven Resource Network focused on delivering language training supports and resources for teachers in the Safe Haven program. And so I want to take a moment to let everyone introduce themselves and where they're coming from. So I'm going to hand it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Kieran. My name is Lisa Herrera. I'm the project lead on this project, and I'd like to acknowledge that I'm privileged to live on the land of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh.
Hi, I'm Arthur. I'm one of the curriculum writers on this team. My sort of home organization is with ISS of BC, and I'm working and living on the shared ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea LeClaire. I work at Diversity, and I'd like to recognize I have the privilege of living and working on the Katzie and Kwantlen First Nations.
My name is Mahasadi. I'm a curriculum writer on this project. I'd like to acknowledge the Coast Salish Nation, specifically the Lekwungen-speaking people on whose land I live and work.
Thanks, Maha. Hello, everybody. My name is Tia, and I'm also one of the curriculum writers, and I work at the Intercultural Association of Victoria. And I'm very grateful and privileged to be joining you from the traditional and unceded lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples today.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your work bringing this training to everyone today. We very much appreciate the effort and time that has gone into making sure that we have this opportunity available to all of us today.
Thank you. You can see the agenda on the slide, so I'm not going to read it out. But just to let you know that we are going to do a little bit of brief introduction. The main time in this presentation will be with our guest presenter, Jessica Leslie. One note that I want to make is that during this presentation, there will be some links to resources put into the chat. Those resources are hosted on Tutela. So if you're not currently registered on Tutela, don't try to navigate away and register now. After the meeting, you can register for Tutela, and then when AMSA sends out the video, they will also send out the links again, and you will have access to them then. Thank you. And there will be questions at the end, so please, during the breakout room, if you can focus on the breakout room activity, and then we will do more general questions at the end.
Hey, I guess it's me next. Okay, so why does accessibility really matter for refugee claimants? Well, many of these learners are not just learning English. They are also managing trauma, stress, or gaps in their schooling. That can make it harder for them to fully engage in lessons or complete an assessment. EAL classrooms are incredibly diverse, and a lot of needs aren't immediately visible. Some learners have learning differences, disabilities, or mental health challenges that affect how they process information and participate in class. But here's the challenge. Disability and accessibility are rarely included in EAL training or program design. That often leaves teachers figuring things out on their own. And when lessons and assessments are rigid or one size fits all, even highly capable learners can be unintentionally blocked from showing what they can do. This is why accessibility isn't optional. It's a shared responsibility. When we make classrooms more accessible, everyone benefits. More importantly, We create a space where all learners, including refugee claimants, have a real opportunity to succeed. Okay, who are our learners? Our learners are refugee claimants, and many have complex migration backgrounds that shape their experiences and needs. Some have interrupted or limited formal schooling, so they may not have had consistent access to education before arriving. They are learning English while navigating legal uncertainty, stress, and the challenges of resettlement, which can affect how they engage in the classroom. Learners bring diverse abilities, including both visible and invisible disabilities that aren't always immediately apparent. Despite these challenges, they show incredible resilience, even when they don't have reliable access to the support they need to get ahead. So, why we're here? What's our goal? We're here because accessibility is often overlooked in EAL, even though many learners rely on it to fully engage and succeed. There is a real gap. Teachers and programs rarely get the training or support they need to respond effectively to diverse learners' needs. Our goal today is threefold. Build a shared understanding of what accessibility in EAL really means. Explore practical strategies that can be applied in classrooms and programs, and foster collective responsibility so accessibility isn't just one person's job, but something we all contribute to. And for that purpose, I'll leave it to Andrea to introduce our wonderful presenter today. Okay, Andrea?
Today, we have the privilege to have an amazing guest speaker, Jessica Leslie. She is from ISANS, the Immigrant Services Association of Nova Scotia. Jessica is a team lead and accessibility support coordinator at ISANS. So let's welcome Jessica for this wonderful presentation. Thank you.
As you heard, my name is Jessica Leslie, and I am the accessibility support program coordinator at the Immigration Services Association of Nova Scotia. That's a bit of a mouthful. We tend to call it ISANS. I am a former literacy teacher, and I was the team lead of the literacy team for several years. And I'm very excited to talk to you today about supporting disabilities in an EAL context. So I want to give a brief introduction to ISANS, just because you may not be familiar with it, just about our program. I want to take a look at what types of disabilities you may encounter in a given language program. I want to talk about some local and national resources that you can turn to, talk quickly about ways to encourage a culture of inclusivity, and then finally a quick look about how we've built ISAN's accessibility program, hopefully to maybe spark some ideas of your own. Okay, so I'd like to start with my own land acknowledgement. And something that happened recently, I was really encouraged at, might have been BC Teal actually a couple of years ago, to look into my own land history and the places that I've lived and the people's land, whose land I've traveled in my journey to get to Halifax. And it was interesting because my family's history tells me that I'm a descendant of the Choctaw Cherokee tribe who was forced to leave their home and walk the Trail of Tears to Oklahoma in the United States. Their descendants eventually made their way across the land to the Pacific coast, where my parents raised me and my brother on the traditional land of the Chumash Indians. In my 20s, I moved up to British Columbia and I moved around the Kwantlen and Semiahmoo lands. And then 8.5 years ago, my husband and I moved our entire family to the part of Mi'kmaq called Halifax. And it wasn't really until I moved to Halifax that I started hearing more about the treaties. They're talked about a lot out here, and I've really got the idea of what unceded meant. And so with that in mind, I'm thankful for the peace and friendship treaties, which the Mi'kmaq initiated with the British in the mid 1700s, and then were reaffirmed here in 1982. And now at ISANS, as we seek to settle newcomers in Nova Scotia, it's so crucial that we teach the history of the people and the land that we all share. So, hi, Chika. Okay, I want to just give you an idea of the scope of what iSANS does. Now, we are basically a one-stop shop for everything settlement in Halifax and Nova Scotia. So unlike other major urban areas where there are multiple service providers providing different services each, you've got one who's doing employment, one who's doing language, one who's doing settlement, etc. We do everything in-house, as it were. Now, I'm obviously not going to go through all of these numbers because it is a lot, but I do want to look at our language service program just so that you have some scope of what I deal with every day. So last year, we saw over 4,500, almost 4,800 language learners in 200 active classes. 35 are in specialized language programs. So that's LINC, of which LINC is one. So we have a lot of different language programs across our program, including employment work classes and skill specific classes. So that just gives you an idea of how big our organization is and the potential for accessibility referrals that I may get on any given day. Okay, so before we get to any, solutions or what do we do next, we need to have some solid data to understand what the situation looks like. So an estimated 1.3 billion people experience significant disability. This represents 16% of the world's population, or 1 in 6 of us. 80% of these come from the global south. So think about your clients and where they're coming from. And if they come from the global south, the likelihood of a disability is much, much higher. So, but I am curious, and I'm not sure if you all have, do they have the raise hand function, or did you guys take that away? I can't remember what you said. Maybe just put it in the chat. Let's do that. I would like to know how many of you know a person with a disability. Just put yes or no in the chat. So our stat said 16%, but even among us, it's 100%. We know 100% of us know somebody with a disability. And we all want those people to be able to access the resources that they need to succeed. So in a program context, because that's what we're here for, we're here to talk about our programs and our classes. If you have a class with 25 students, you will have approximately 4 students with a disability. That is a statistical reality. Now, those can be physical disabilities, learning, or behavioral disabilities. Honestly, physical disabilities are sometimes the easiest to accommodate and support. If your program supports 200 students, 32 of them will have a disability. Or if your program is like iSANS and you support 2,700, you will have 393, I think. I might be wrong on my math. I do teach English, not math. Students with some sort of disability that needs help. So now, to be fair, not all of these will need direct support, depending on the program demands, but the numbers are still good to bear in mind. And I just wanted to show you quickly a breakdown of our program at iSANS. So this, I did it in September and I did it again in December, and the numbers had not changed very much. But something to keep in mind, we have a dedicated literacy program, which is the equivalent of foundation to EAL, and then we mix them into our mainstream CLBs 3 and higher. But 56% of the clients on my caseload, or on our program caseload, are literacy students. And then you can see the breakdown. We go all the way up to CLB 7 in our LINC classes, in our daytime LINC classes. So just to give you an idea where it falls, it's something. Okay, also in the chat, please tell me, what learning or behavioral challenges have you had or think you've had in your classrooms or in your programs if you're not a classroom instructor? Just, yeah, put it in the chat. What are some things you've experienced or have guessed that things that were happening? These are some of the ones that I thought of. We have some neurospicy people in our program with autism or ADHD. There's behavioral challenges, cognitive impairments. There might be traumatic brain injuries, hearing loss, sight loss, dyslexia, and as we know, trauma can also present with very similar symptoms as many of these. Okay, now what makes that difficult is how do we know what it is? Well, we have some confounding factors. We know that entry-level English language learners have a lot of the same issues. They switch letters all the time because they're still learning it. It's new. They don't understand what they read. They can't hear specific sounds. They may be learning a new orthography, right? They may be going from Arabic to Latin-based language, so they're going the other way. There are literacy gaps for mainstream students, especially if they have interrupted education, like I believe Maha said earlier. There is rarely an official diagnosis, and we aren't trained in our CELTAs or TESOL certificates to recognize those challenges, even though we know that they're going to be in our classes. Or they come from a culture where they don't recognize disability. So it was never, they just thought they were stupid, or they were just shoved along a program, or they dropped out. Adults, if you're teaching an all adult program, they've aged out of any provincial help. And unless they are independently wealthy or even willing to pursue a diagnosis, the likelihood of getting one is slim to none. And there are very few professionals who do adult testing, especially with second language learners. And as my earlier graph demonstrated, there's a lot of overlaps between different challenges. So two people might be presenting a similar issue, but let's say not hearing sounds correctly. But for one of them, the point of origin is dyslexia, and for the other one, it's an undiagnosed hearing problem. So there's lots of fun playing Sherlock Holmes pretty much every day as a teacher, or if you're like me in this type of role. For teachers and program coordinators, because I know we have a mix here, the most important and frequent question that I get is this: how do we differentiate between specific learning disabilities and typical new language learning gaps? And the answer is deceptively simple. One, it comes across in multiple areas. Dyslexia, for example, does not just present itself in reading. It's not a reading only problem. Once you know what to look for, you will see it in their writing. You may see it in their speaking. You will see it in other areas. So looking for it, if somebody has ADHD, one skill is not the problem. It's going to be evident in lots of different areas. Another thing is that it's persistent. And what I mean by that is that it's persistent over years and does not respond to normal teaching methods. So what I mean by that, a new language learner will also switch letters or sounds at the beginning. But as they grow with familiarity of the language and its use, they will eventually correct themselves. A person with a true disability will not. Their issue is going to stick around. And then the last one, as a teacher, there's a sense that something is different. I don't want you to overlook the importance of this last one. That feeling that something is different, that one of these things is not like the other. I like to call this our teacher's spidey senses. If you've ever watched Spider-Man, he has the sense when the bad guys are around. We have evolved these types of feelings for a reason as a species, and they shouldn't be ignored. And if you've been in the classroom for any amount of time, you're going to get that sense. And if you think that something is wrong, it probably is. Listen to that feeling. So a little bit deeper, what are some things that, what does that sense mean? So here's some red flags that I want you to look out for. Lack of speed despite years of intervention or practice. And I like to call these my turtles, bless them. And they, they may progress ever so slowly, but they're still writing at the speed of somebody who's only been in class for a couple of months, for example. Or their reading fluency has never improved. So they're slow. Their processing is still very, very slow. Lack of application of heavily scaffolded concepts. So things that you have done over and over and over to the nth degree. And then that comes to the assessment and it's like, oh my gosh, they've never seen it before. Or you change one thing in the activity and they completely lose the ability to do it. That's a red flag. Lack of progress over months and years. So students who are stuck in the same level. We know if you're teaching like in a link program, the average time for a mainstream is a minimum of 10 months. So, around a year per level. But then you get those students who they're in the same level for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. IRCC had been calling them languishing learners a few years ago. That's a red flag, right? If they're not getting it over a long period of time. If there are ongoing issues with basic concepts, and I mean, they're getting up to CLB 2 and 3 and they still can't decode CVC words. So things that, somehow they're able to pass a test because they've memorized something or they've memorized exactly that test. But in the real world, you ask them to read something new and the concept's just not there. If there are multiple stumped instructors, so they've gone the circuit, they've taught, they've worked their way through multiple teachers and all the teachers are going, I don't know what's going on. He just isn't getting it. That's a red flag to look for. And then if you're lucky, if you're very, very lucky, they will tell you that they've always had the problem in question. Oh, teacher, learning to read in my language was really, really hard. Or I wasn't a good student when I was in school or anything like that. If they tell you that, that is a huge red flag because disabilities are not just in one language. They cross those boundaries. Okay, so that's a brief overview of what challenges you may encounter. But I know you want to know, where can you go to find some help? What can you do? So let's look at some places that you or your staff can turn to for resources and support. So at the local level, do as much professional development as you can. For reading disorders like dyslexia, if you have the funding, can you do a 4-day Orton Gillingham course with your lower level staff? So like, literacy foundation to CLB2. For higher level reading comprehension, there are 2-day Linda Mood Bell workshops. So that's another program similar to Orton Gillingham that focuses on reading disorders. So something like that. Or can you bring speakers in? If you are part of a college or university program, sometimes they have an accessibility department. Can they come and talk to your teachers? Or if you are lucky enough to live near a university with like an occupational therapy program or a speech language program, can you partner with their graduate program to come in and work with some of your students? So that's something that we did for a couple of years in a row. Haven't been able to get it together since, but before COVID, we had the occupational therapy program at Dalhousie come and have their second year master's students do a 6-week placement with us. And so they came and I was able to direct them to students who needed help beyond my expertise. So if you can partner with local graduate programs, that's another place you can turn. And personal connections. So tap into any personal connections you have. Do you have any friends that are public school teachers? Ask them. They do this all the time because we screen for this in our kids, in our public school. So, if you've got a student who's doing something wonky with their reading, go to your public school peers and friends and say, hey, I have a student who's doing X, Y, Z. Have you ever had a student do that? And what did you guys do? What helped? Because the thing about disability, and well, the thing about language learning, as we all know, is that we learn in stages, not ages. So our students, especially if they're like literacy students, they're at the same stage that a lot of kids are in kindergarten through grade 1, 2, and 3. So if you have peers or friends who teach those grades, perfect people to ask. Okay. So that's at the local level. At the provincial and further level, provincial and federal level, every province has provincial disability societies. So, the provincial dyslexia society, the provincial uh, brain injury society, for example. Reach out to them. They will happily talk your ear off about whatever the disorder is, and they may have resources that you may not know about, or they may be able to come in. I'm going to talk about later about dealing with stigma, but like having guest speakers come in to talk about the disability and living with a disability in Canada to get people aware and get some more information. Great thing to do. And often with those provincial societies, they'll come in and they'll do it for free because they have a budget for public training and public awareness. So something to think about. And then at the national level, I really, Lisa said it earlier, please look at Tutela. So IRCC had created Tutela or funded Tutela years ago. And it is where link teachers across Canada, I find it a lot more out on the East Coast than when I lived in BC, but it's a repository for lesson plans, for resources, for webinars, for whatever. It's free. If you teach EAL in Canada, you can sign up. Like Lisa said, please don't do it now after the session. But Tutela has lots and lots and lots of things. And it is where I post all of the resources that I have developed for helping with various disabilities. So if you've ever gone on a dive into the interwebs about helping students with disabilities, it's always kids. Every resource I could ever find was geared towards kids. And I don't teach kids, I teach adults. And so I ended up writing a whole bunch of stuff or taking things that did already exist and adapting it to be adult friendly. And so Tutela is where I send people, where I post everything that I make for various disabilities. And I want to show you a couple specifically that I think will be very, very helpful to you as you try to navigate what might be happening with your students and how you might go about helping them. So we're going to do a little bit of a live demo on the Tutela site. And the first one that I'm going to do, so I'm going to stop sharing. So the first one, and you're going to play with it a little bit later, which I'm really excited about. This was a COVID project, I'll put it that way. So this was, I like to call this one my mind dump. It is an at a glance guide to challenges in the classroom and things that a teacher can try to do to mitigate. So in the absence of any diagnosis, which is going to be the most common, especially if you teach any literacy lower level students, all we have to go on is observation. And so this guide is divided up into what a teacher might observe during or in activities in the 4 skill areas, as well as behavioral challenges, how they might behave behaviorally or emotionally or physically. So as you can see here, I should scroll down so it's easier, more of the screen. Okay, so as you can see here in the table of contents, it is categorized by type. So you can see I've got listening, speaking, reading, writing, metacognitive, and I've got the list of all of what those things mean. And you can, if you download this, it's hyperlinked, so you can click directly to go to it. That was just something fun I was playing with, learning how to do fun hyperlinks within a document. But anyway, so when you click on something, it's going to take you to a chart. And as you can see, On the left, it's got the category at the top, so listening. It'll have the behaviors that you observe on the left. In the middle, you can see some suggestions of what might be the cause. Now, this is less important, but I included it just for interest's sake, something that you can look into further if you so choose. But then on the right are several things that you can try. So it's obviously, I tried to be as thorough as possible. It's about 30 pages long, but it's not going to have everything, but it was things that I have observed in my classes up until that point. So I'll just scroll. I'll just show you. So difficulty writing down what they hear. So this is in the listening. Squinted or confused looks, poor grasp of phonics. And then the speaking section. Are they switching sounds or words when speaking? Do they have difficulty blending sounds? Oh, okay, it won't let me do that. Okay, so let's take a look at, let's see here. Let's look at difficulty following directions. So these are audio directions. This was in the listening section. So difficulty following directions, especially if there are several steps. So what could cause that? That could be an executive function deficit. It could be autism. It could be ADHD. It could have an auditory processing disorder, right? Again, not as important, but possibility of several reasons why this may be the case. Okay, what are some things that you can try? You can present instructions in chunks with fewer steps at a time, especially if you're at the higher levels. This is something that I find literacy teachers are really good at, but once you get past CLB3, teachers start giving more and more and more and more information, and they forget that some people can't take in that amount of information. So I remind them, chunking. If reading along simultaneously, put directions in list form rather than wrapped paragraph form. That's easier to follow. Going over directions verbally multiple times and slowly. And then another thing you could try is before they start whatever task that they're supposed to be doing, ask them to repeat what the first step is. So getting them to say it. So you've gone through, we're going to do this. I would like you to do X, Y, Z. It's on the paper, do X, Y, Z. Okay, Mohammed, what is X? What is step one? What are we doing? So you're checking in to make sure they know what the first step is. So anyway, that's this document. Like I said, it's 30 pages long. And it tries to give as many reasonable suggestions as I can. Okay, so that's the first resource. So the EAL Guide to Disability in the Classroom. The next one that I want to draw your attention to are the observation and referral forms. So one of my former colleagues was an occupational therapist, and so she and I made these together, her with her OT lens and me with my EAL teacher lens. And so we put together just a 2-page teacher observation form. And this is exactly what I use at iSANS. This is what I give to every teacher says, I think there's something going on. I like, fill this out. So it breaks it down by skill. And it's asking, what are you observing? So it allows the teacher to draw their attention to what they're really observing rather than just going, and it gives them some prompts for other things they may not have thought about, but they may have observed without knowing. So we've got, writing. Is it illegible handwriting? Is there pain while writing? Are they quick to fatigue? Reading, speaking, listening, cognitive function, sensory movement, distraction, mental health, physical questions, and then there's some blanks that people can fill out information. So that's the teacher observation. And then to match with that is a much, much bigger 9-page accessibility functional evaluation. And it matches the same sections as that teacher evaluation form. Come on now. This is a downloadable document. I purposely kept it in Word so that you could change it, so that it is, I have iSANS on there. I just uploaded straight from my files, but you can change it to to the name of your organization, obviously. Whenever I put anything from iSans, I always put it up in Word or PowerPoint because, I'm not the final authority on any of this. And if you know other things or want to add or take away from what I've put up there, by all means, be my guest. Okay, so the more fulsome observation form. So you have the teacher observation, which is just the 2-page, really quick, give me an idea of what's going on. And then what happens is I, as the accessibility instructor, or maybe a coordinator or a supervisor, could come in and do this more fulsome one where it matches, but it's an expansion thereof. So I've got space for all the client information, any history with your organization, if they have any current supports and they've disclosed any disabilities, what the student wants, like why are they learning English, what do they want help with, brief summary of their history with you, recommendations. Okay, so now this is the part that mirrors the teacher referral. So you have the physical challenges, and then I just go through everything you could possibly think of. And like I said, this was an occupational therapist and me, so we really got thorough. So when I have this 9-page observation form and I'm going into a classroom, cognitive functions, metacognition, and then language skills like listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Writing. Looks like the formatting got a little wonky. Other skills, numeracy, can they use scissors? Can they keyboard? Right? So I'm not going to fill out all 9 pages of this when I go through. I'm going to fill out the section that correlates with what the teacher observed. So that's the section that I'm going to focus on. If I happen to observe something else while I'm there, sure, I'll put it on there. But for the most part, like, try not to be overwhelmed by like all of this, because you wouldn't use all of this. You would just use the section that was necessary. You can see back on my presentation slide here, there are 6 resources that I've noted for you. Just showed you the first 2. I'll just quickly talk through. The Sight Loss Teacher Toolkit is a resource for integrating students with various levels of sight loss. So in the toolkit, I worked with a blind educational advisor, actually out of Surrey, and she and I met on Zoom for almost a year working on this together. So in the toolkit, you'll find information on common eye conditions, recommendations for program administrators, practical tips for teachers, suggestions for low and high tech support, and some examples of adapted lesson plans from literacy up to CLB 6. So we included purchase recommendations, links, templates that can be immediately used in a classroom setting. The toolkit has the advantage of being applicable for any type of language class and is purposely designed so that whether a program is rural or urban, academic, community-based, online, in person, the teachers can easily implement the recommendations and students can be integrated into class. I actually have 2 fully blind students, one in CLB 5 and one in CLB 7 right now. So we know that it works. The phonics, explicit phonics modules. So if those are to help students with diagnosed and undiagnosed reading disorders, if you believe that you have some and you would like to have a structured phonics program that you can start working with, I have written one. So you can take a look at those 2. The first one is from literacy, so teaching single letter sounds to blending CVC words. And then CLBs 3 through 5 is working with different syllable types and learning the different syllable types in English. The Zones of Regulation curriculum is a module to support mental health and self-regulation and trauma in the classroom. If you are familiar, again, Zones of Regulation is for children. It was designed by an occupational therapist for kids to help them deal with big emotions, because kids have a lot of big emotions. But when I was going through it, I was like, man, we could totally use this in an EAL context. It teaches, it teaches colors, teaches emotion words, and it teaches strategies on how to manage emotions in a healthy way. So I wrote a whole bunch of that. That goes from foundation. I've got lessons through CLB 7 in there. So that's there for you as well. If you want a trauma-informed mental health unit, please take a look. And then letter formation is a module to work with literacy students who have never held a pencil before and how to teach them. Because again, in our TESOL programs, well, their presumption is that they're already literate in a first language, so they just have to learn how to write the new shapes and off they go, right? It's this like basically information transfer. And then you get literacy students who come from a non-print culture and they've never held a pen. And you're like, okay, what do I like? They're holding it like this. I have students that grab pencils like this, or they've got quad grip and it just looks really painful, and they're making marks all over the page. They have no control. How do you teach that? We know how. So there is a program in elementary schools called Handwriting Without Tears. And I took that and I adapted it for adults, and I adapted it for EAL. So it teaches them from pre-writing shapes. So there are 9 shapes that a person needs to be to conquer, I guess you could say. They need to be able to make before, or in order to make all of the symbols that we use for our alphabet. So the module that I have on Tutela there goes from pre-writing shapes through the alphabet in a systematic and explicit way. And it also helps with dyslexia and other directionally challenged issues. So why am I bringing this to attention? For I know a lot of you are, not teachers, you're administrators, but let me talk to the administrators for a minute. Mostly because when teachers come across students with challenges and they feel unable to address those challenges, they're going to come to you, the administrators, their leaders, their supervisors, and they will hopefully want to discuss and troubleshoot how to best support those students. And so these resources are places that you can send them to do just that. Okay, woo, time is flying. Oh my goodness. It is already 6:20. Okay, moving on to creating inclusive environments. So this is highly, highly, highly important. And I know that you already know this because we get this from the diversity lens more so than the inclusion lens. We're used to including people of diverse backgrounds and nationalities and languages and things like that. But we also need to do it very explicitly and purposefully through the differences of mind type, body type, things like that. So addressing the fear of being different. Many of our learners see difference as a bad thing. And having strengths and weaknesses is a very normal part of life. We all know that. But if our students see differences as a bad thing, that can affect their reception of adaptive techniques and extra assistance. So creating a culture of acceptance and patience is key to inclusive environments. So in the classroom, for example, I actually teach my students the phrase, "let me think," or "give me a minute." And then I actually give them the time and space to finish their thoughts. So this allows them an alternative to just, I don't know, if they are feeling rushed. I teach the whole class to respect that and not to try and jump in and answer for them. Now, you personally may need to change your descriptions of learner-produced items from good and no good to good and mistake. Good and no good are very easy to slip into because it's what the students use. They say, "Oh, teacher, this is no good." Or, you put a sentence on the board for correction and say, "Okay, is this good or no good?" Now, the problem is that good and no good are words that often had moral implications, whether or not we mean them to. So students start to internalize to mean I am no good. Mistakes, however, are something that everyone makes. And as a colleague of mine said, if we aren't making mistakes, then we're not learning. if we're perfect, there's nothing new to learn. So we want mistakes. So creating that culture of trying and being okay with failing. Okay. Second, I very, very, very strongly believe that we need to be fighting stigma at both the classroom level and the program level. So for our classrooms, that is what I just talked about. It's talking about failing. It's talking about being different. It's talking about lived experiences. And I'll throw my blind students out there for a minute. I ask them, do you want to share with the class what happened or how your life has been? So that they can take ownership of it and let people know they're not ashamed. So that's at the classroom level. At the program level, for us at ISANS, what that meant is inviting the disability and advocacy community into our classrooms as guest speakers. So I run an anti-stigma speaker series 3 times a year. So we have 3 locations at ISANS. So once a year, I invite different groups to come in so that I can normalize differences and show them that one can have a disability and still have a successful life in Canada. Because the more open that our students are to sharing, the more open they are to getting help that they need. So I've had Autism Nova Scotia come in. I have the Alzheimer's Society coming in next month. I've had Paralympians come in and talk about their sport. I've had, whom else have I had come in? I've had a mental health society come in. I've had active living come in for some of our seniors. So I invite different groups to come in and just talk and say, hey, this is the reality of somebody who has this disorder in Canada, or this is my lived experience, and this is what I do. And that's fine, because what happens is 2 things happen. It fights stigma that we're not ashamed in Canada. We don't hide people behind closed doors here. That you can still have a job, you can still have a successful life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other thing it does is it lets people know if they have this in their families or in their circles, there's somewhere they can go for help, right? So it's doing 2 things at once, which I really, really enjoy. And something like with our autism, I'll give it as an example, because teachers always ask me, well, what about those students, older or from a different culture? They're like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about mental health. I don't want to, and they don't engage. I said, that's fine. Absolutely fine. They're still hearing it. They're still getting the vocabulary. And if in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, whatever, they have a situation and they need to talk to their doctor, they've got the language to do it. So that's that. Okay. I would love to know some of your ideas. Now, I know we're going to have some breakout rooms later, but maybe could we put in the chat if you have any ways that you address the address difference in your classroom that's been successful? I'd love to hear. I don't know. Can we have people just turn on their mics? Is that bad? I'm not sure if we have. Do we have time? Kieran, are you marking what time it is? I don't even know. How much time do I have?
I think we might not have time for people to just chime in, but folks can definitely put in the chat.
Put it in the chat. Okay. Yeah. I'd love for you to share your ideas, because I have a lot of knowledge, but you are your own best resource. So if you have ideas about how you address stigma or how you encourage students to take risks in classrooms, or, address being different, please put it in the chat. We'd love to learn from you as well. Okay. So I think I technically have like 10 minutes left. Is that because I think we started at I think I started at 5:40. Is that right? Sorry, 5:40 my time.
Yes, I think 10 minutes is
about right. Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is I want to share how we've built our accessibility program here at ISANS. And iSense Accessibility Support Program, or ASP as we lovingly call it, started in 2018, and we've been growing by leaps and bounds ever since. We currently have 3 full-time accessibility instructors, including me as the coordinator. The ideal ASP staff is an experienced EAL instructor who also has training or life experience in learning disabilities or accessible education. And I grant it is hard to find. I do know that. Very early on, we adopted the same system as the public schools in North America use, and that is called the multi-tier system of support. It allows for helping more students than a traditional separate special needs class. The multi-tier system of support looks at all kinds of accessibility needs and is able to respond regardless of the diagnosis, and more often than not, the lack thereof. And it lets us keep as many students as possible in regular classes. So I want to take a look at each one in turn. Okay, so they are separated into tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 1 is the program level, and this can be done by anybody. It doesn't have to be by a designated accessibility person. It can be by any type of supervisor, or if you have an accessibility person, great. The biggest focus of this tier is teacher training. So we do a lot of PD with our teachers on different topics of supporting disability in the classroom. So things like, what is universal design? What is differentiated instruction? How to support dyslexia in the language classroom? How to support ADHD? Multisensory learning. This tier also allows for our team to create resources like all the ones that I just shared, that we can then train our teachers on so that they can take forward without needing our direct intervention regularly. So for example, that explicit phonics program, I have taught it to the entire literacy department, and we have scaffolded, we have scope and sequence for the whole phonics program at each level of our literacy program. There's the writing formation curriculum. There's UDL writing systems. So yeah, all those things that are on Tutela, I do as PD at iSans regularly. So we often will create these things, then we'll either do a PD session, or I will team teach with a teacher so that they have the foundation to move forward. And then lastly, at this tier, we maintain a multisensory learning library. So this is mostly for our lower and literacy levels, but these are activities and materials that allow students to learn using different senses. So sandpaper letters, you can get them on Amazon from the Montessori schools. They're tiles with the alphabet in sandpaper, and it's that we have so many nerve endings in our fingers so they can trace it. So things like that students can sign out, that teachers can sign out to use in their classes, like during stations time, for example. So that's, obviously for the lower levels, but at the higher levels, at any level, it includes hearing amplifiers for our students with hearing loss, pencil grips for students who are learning how to write, or students who have pain or arthritis in their hands, magnifiers. So I've got these, they look like little tables. They're a rectangle with a giant lens on them, and they've got fold down legs, and you can just set it on top of a paper and it just magnifies it. And those can be used at any level. So that's tier 1. Tier 2. So tier 2 is at the classroom level. And this is the bulk of our program. This is 98% of the students. These are students who are in regular classes. They are the historically languishing learners, according to IRCC. They're the ones who are in a class or a level for years without progressing, and no one can figure out why. So at any given time of the year, we average about 65 to 80 students at getting to tier 2 support. So this can look one of 3 ways, and this is the same as the public schools. Push-in support. So push-in support is where an accessibility ASP instructor joins the student in class for regular support. So this could be like as a scribe for a test, or it could be ongoing regular support in the classroom a couple days a week, extra support for the teacher as well for what that student needs. So I had a student who was in a wheelchair, and he was paralyzed on one side. And so he had a really hard time like opening his binder, or he also had ADHD. So he was always like, ah. And so I would go in twice a week and I would help him, and I would help keep him focused. I would help him with opening his binder. I helped him get a laptop so that he could do one finger typing instead of handwriting, because he couldn't write very well with his paralysis. So that's push-in support. And you can, depending on the disability and the level of disability, you can accomplish that through volunteers, just so that you know. As long as you have volunteers who are willing to stay for longer than 8 weeks. That's always the challenge. Okay, pull out support is a little bit more, you need somebody who knows what they're doing. Pull out support is when the accessibility instructor pulls a student out of class 1 to 2 times a week and gives targeted support for a needed skill. So for example, our classes run 5 days a week. At the literacy level, they're 2.5 hours long. And so there's a break in the middle. So I would pull a student out twice a week for just the first half of class. So they're going to get a good hour and 15 minutes twice a week with me. And they would get, targeted reading support for dyslexia, for example. I'm working with a group of CLB4 students right now on writing because they're writing in word salads. And I think there's some dyslexia there, but it's manifesting in their writing, not so much in their reading. So things like that. So pull out support, you're taking them out of class and you're targeting in a way that the teacher cannot do in a regular class time. And then the third type of tier 2 support, and this is a big group, is the ongoing teacher support for accommodations and adaptations. So often many students don't need necessarily targeted support. They just need an accommodation plan that the classroom teacher can facilitate. The assigned ASP or accessibility instructor or team would come up with an accommodation plan, help the teacher set it up, and then check in monthly. I check in monthly to make sure that's still working, inquire if it needs any adjustments, and respond accordingly. This tends to be my biggest group in tier 2, but it takes the least amount of time. So, okay. And then the last tier is tier 3. Tier 3 is for clients for whom regular classes are not an option. So say for cognitive reasons, they've got cognitive challenges. Now, this last tier is where many programs begin and end as a standalone special ed class. And we have found that this is honestly the smallest group, and as such is not sustainable if it is the only group that is supported. With the ebb and flow of these clients, you may only have 2 or 3 for a couple of years, and then suddenly there's 12. And also without firm or set timelines, these clients could stay in class indefinitely. And because their progress tends to be much slower, or they're going to permanently plateau at a given point. And I know that sounds harsh, but clients for whom a regular class is not an option, say for those cognitive reasons, we will give one-on-one classroom language for a set period of time. So we work with the family, and there has to be an explicit community integration goal and agreed upon transition plan before we will even start. So we just want them to learn some English is not a clear enough goal. It's not measurable. So once we have a measurable goal, I'll give you an example of a student that I had who did this. He was going to go into a supported employment in a bakery. That was his community integration. So once we have that, we can target the language training to that goal and determine the period of time for support. For him, it was 1 year. He got 2 sessions of an hour and a half, I think, a week, one-on-one for a year. And then at the end, we graduate that person into that community support, and our time with them is done. So I think, yeah, that is everything. So thank you so much. Only having an hour meant that I feel like I flew through the possibilities of what you could encounter and what you could do. But we do have time. We are going to do some breakout activities and hopefully dig in a little bit deeper. But I do hope that that was helpful for everyone. You can see my email at the bottom there, jleslie@isans.ca. And I would be more than happy to chat with any of you about what we've talked about today.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Jessica. And
Yeah.
I know we only had, 45 minutes, 50 minutes for you to talk and help and support us. And I know that we could do, a 2-day workshop on this, but we really appreciate what you've shared with us and different tools. So thank you so much, Jessica. And Jessica is going to be sticking around and coming into our breakout room activity and supporting that as well. If you have any questions for her related to directly to the activity in the breakout rooms, please go ahead and ask her. Okay, so we've listened, we've learned, and now it's time to put things into practice with a breakout room activity. So we're going to look at 3 different classroom case studies, as you can see on the slide here, and some teacher observed behaviors. What we would like you to do is read the scenario and the observed behaviors, discuss with your group, and come up with different classroom strategies based on what you have learned today and your own experiences. We're going to divide you into 4 different breakout rooms. So if you're in group 1, please start on case study 1. Group 2, start on case study 2. Group 3 and 4, start on case study 3. Okay, so what we're going to do from there is if you finish your strategies, go ahead and work on the next case study. That's no problem. There will be one curriculum writer from our project in each group going around, and they will be the scribe and the spokesperson for after the activity to share some strategies with everybody. Once you are in your group, please unmute yourself and come on camera. If for some reason you're not able to come on camera or you can't unmute yourself, please just send a message into your group chat so we know what's going on. Introduce yourself to your group members, talk about what your role is, what organization you work for. This activity was specifically designed for teachers. I know that there are some support supervisors as well as managers in this group today, but we do value everyone's feedback, and so please try to participate if possible. That would be amazing. So we're going to have 25 minutes in our breakout rooms. There will be a 5-minute and a 1-minute reminder. And if you have any questions or you're feeling a bit stuck, please ask your curriculum writer. They have some ideas and suggestions to get you started if needed. So if you have any questions, yeah, please ask your room support person. And I'm really excited to listen to the discussions and strategies that everyone comes up with. And thank you so much again, Jessica, and we look forward to seeing you in the breakout rooms and for the Q&A after.
So we want to have just a little quick debrief from what you talked about. So if we can have our moderator, I guess, from room 1, give us a little summary of the classroom strategies that you talked about.
That was my group, at least initially, before moving on to some of the other ones. Um, and yeah, so I think like a regular check-ins for organizing the binder was something that came up quite a bit, and a few suggestions that like of when to do that. Jessica came to join us and suggested that at the end of a monthly theme or a bi-weekly theme, if that's how your program divides things. During learner conferences, one of our teacher participants, Kyle, had suggested that as well. And just being really explicit about like what goes where in the binder. Jessica had also suggested color coding dividers for skill building as in addition to the assessments in the binder. And another good one, just dealing with like the excess energy coming from lack of focus is things like fidget spinners, fidget kits, but anything to sort of help direct excess energies and occupy students, giving them something to do, giving like opportunities to have body breaks from like within class to get up and move and stretch and yeah. So those were some of the things we talked about in our group there.
Great. And who was room two, if we can
Yes.
get a summary from room
Yes.
two?
Yeah, Maha, can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Okay,
hear you.
okay. All right. So in my group, I was really lucky to have Anu. She has long experience working with people with like lower levels, all kind of levels, and people with disabilities. And she encountered all these issues in her own classes. Okay. So, and the group were very, very active, and they were suggesting great things. Like they suggest that we should grab her attention by calling her by name because she has lack of attention and she was spacing out. Okay. And they also suggested that we work with her one-on-one and we pull this person and then build the relationship with the student, okay, to build confidence, and they can trust you and they can pay more attention to what you say, okay? And also they suggested that we should give them more processing time, okay, to get or to grab the materials and understand what's going on in the classroom. And the other one that I really liked is seating arrangements. They said people who have this kind of difficulty, they should sit close to the teacher if possible, so the teacher can pay attention to what's happening there and they can intervene whenever this is appropriate. Okay. Okay, so and also there's another suggestion to differentiate materials. So different materials for different students. Okay, so we give more for students who have no challenges and less for students who have some kind of disability or learning challenges. So these are all great tips. And I was writing and writing and writing, and people, yeah, it's just, yeah, they are really good for me personally. I'm going to use all of them. So thank you very much for my group.
Thank you. Thank you, Maha. And Tia, your room then, you must have been room number three.
Room number four, but that's okay, I think.
Okay, room number four.
Yeah,
Yes, that's right.
anyways.
We closed three.
Yeah, we had a really great discussion too. And also we had Janice in the room who has taught a lot of different levels and worked with people of diverse learning abilities over the years, and so had a lot to offer. So thanks everybody for that great discussion. So one of the things that was said was for Hassan, maybe making sure he can sit near the door so that if he does need to leave quickly, that he can do that. There's a quick way out for him so that he feels safer. Um, and another strategy was getting a volunteer to work with him one-on-one. And the importance of having a classroom environment where there's no shaming. It's possible that he has a listening challenges or some kind of hearing impairment. So obviously he would need referrals for that if we want to find out if that's the case. And also maybe getting someone with the same language to talk with him. That was also shared, that to find out what is going on for him, that someone that speaks the same language that he feels comfortable with. We also talked a lot about body language and how we can misinterpret body language. And if he has a listening impairment, it might be making him upset because he can't understand. So there might be some frustration there and the other thing about the mumbling was that could be a learned response to avoid having to be singled out to give the wrong answer, so that he's learned that strategy. And so assuring everybody in the class that it's okay to make mistakes. And so again, fostering that atmosphere of a safe and environment in the classroom is so important. And then the last thing was breaking down information into chunks and repeating as much as necessary, especially if there is someone that might seem like they're not understanding, which is the case for so many of us in our classrooms. Yeah, I think that was kind of the gist of what
I'd
we
love
shared
to
here,
jump
Jessica.
on. Yeah, I'd love to
Yep,
jump
please
Yeah.
on
do,
to the
Jessica.
end of that. So something that that we've done now, it just depends on what your funding agreement is, but provisions for disabilities are a big thing right now. It seems like there's a lot of funding for that. Sounds weird to say, I got a lot of funding pushed on me that I didn't ask for. Um, that they didn't bother talking to me. They're just like, let's throw money at the problem. Anyway, but something that I have invested in that has been wildly, wildly successful is I purchased sender receiver voice amplifiers, the kind they use in museums. So you've got the interpreter at the front, and then there's like the little ducklings behind in their language, and they're listening to what the tour guide is saying. I bought them for our teachers. So you can buy like one sender with two receivers or one sender with six receivers. I buy the two packs. So I bought, I think, like 8 of them, and I've spread them around. So students who may have a learning disability or a hearing disability or a hearing loss that hasn't been addressed, I say, are you having, is it hard to hear teacher? Because sometimes teacher isn't loud enough. I always blame myself, right? You kind of do that. And I said, I have something you can try. And all it is it's a little clip, it's a lapel mic for me. And for them, it's a little tiny over ear piece. And then the receiver that goes on their lap or in their pocket. And I'm right in their ear. And the students love it. And other students see it and go, oh, I want to try. And because it comes with 2 receivers, I can at least have 2 students in any given class that can use that. And so it's great for students who know they have hearing loss, and it's great for students who you suspect have hearing loss, and to say, I'd like to try this because sometimes I'm not loud enough. Can you help me? And see if it works. So that's just something, because the mumbling can also indicate hearing loss because they may not have ever heard the sounds clearly enough to make them correctly. So that's usually like lowest hanging fruit when it comes to somebody who's having trouble with dictation or they're having troubles pronouncing things. Lowest hanging fruit is eliminate a hearing problem first. So
I
yeah.
love the way you frame that, Jessica, as saying to the student, like, that, sometimes you aren't
Teacher,
loud enough,
it's my
rather than
problem.
saying
Yeah.
that you are the problem. It's like,
Mhm.
I might be the problem. So do you want to have this? I think that's a
Yeah.
great way of framing it for the students so that they
They don't feel
don't,
outed that
yeah, they
way.
don't feel outed
Yeah.
or shamed. Yeah.
Yeah. And then once we've built that trust, once we got that, then in my one-on-one in our learner feedback sessions, then I can say, have you ever had a hearing test? Do you think
Hmm.
does your family, like we start, once that trust is there and they feel comfortable in something that I'm giving them, then I can broach that topic
Then
and
you can
say,
bring it up.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Anyway,
That's
just wanted
great.
to jump on that.
Thank
I
you
have a
so
quick,
much. Oh, sorry. Go
okay.
ahead, Arthur.
I have a quick question for you, Jessica, related to that, but also when we were in breakout rooms, you were also had some great suggestions about like the fidget stations, and I just wondered if you have like advice you can give for getting management on board with budgetary considerations with things like that. Like, because yeah, I mean, it is just like a lot of the solutions are just like expensive kind of thing, right? And
Some of
they're a
them
little bit
are,
outside of the
yeah.
scope of what we can do as teachers.
Yeah, so what I would do is ask your team lead to put together a very, very small proposal saying, we went to this session and we would love to pursue this as an option because you can buy a fidget box for under $20 on Amazon. It does not have to be expensive. And so and I know they sold them at like Michael's for a while too. So like I know that they're out there and they are reasonable. And before I had the fidget boxes, so before COVID, in my class, I taught a low foundation class, and we did body breaks instead. So after 45 minutes, so if the class was 2.5 hours long, we would have 2 body breaks. 45 minutes. Everybody stands up And we would do like stretches. So everybody hands above your head. Okay, go over here. And, we would do those type of things where and once I got them into a routine of doing it, then I would make, okay, you're the stretch teacher today. Everybody listen to teacher Ama, and they got into it and they loved it because we would do things like we would roll our wrists because they're, getting used to writing. We would stretch our different muscles. We would shake everything out, and so there are ways to do it that are free. The other thing is just making sure that you build in multisensory activities into your class, obviously. So if you're teaching directions, how to do directions. I walked into a teacher's room the other day. She had tape all over the floor. She had taped, because we teach directionality. She had taped a maze on the floor, and they had a person, they had to close their eyes. They had a person standing behind them, and they said, okay, walk forward, turn left, and they had to go through their directions physically, so there are ways that you can build in those body breaks as well. But the affordable, like it used to be a lot more expensive. It has not, it has gotten cheaper. So just depends on what you want to do with it.
Thank you, Jessica. I think we should just pop to our question and answer, Karen, if you want to take over and pose Jessica the questions that you've got in the Q&A in the chat.
You can submit your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box if you have further questions. We do have a few, so I'd like to get some answers to these. So the first one is, how can a teacher effectively teach a class that includes a mix of students with disabilities and students without disabilities?
Differentiated instruction, the same way that you would when you have a level that has very, very low CLB to the ones that are about to progress, because their abilities are different. Somebody who's starting at CLB2 is very, very different, who's just come from CLB1, very, very different from somebody who's ready to go into CLB3. And so it is a matter of universally designing. So UDL is the principle that comes out of architecture. Elevators. Those are universally designed that everybody can access them. And so we design activities purposefully that there are multiple ways of doing them, or there's enough, if we're studying a particular topic, we're doing multiple different activities that are going to be effective for different types of people. And is it going to be effective for everybody? Maybe not, but it's going to be effective for this person at this time. And then in 10 minutes, we're going to change. We're going to do an activity that's going to be effective for that person at that time, etc. And as long as you're not doing the same things all the time, you're going to hit everybody eventually. And then it could also be, I think, I can't remember if it was Arthur that was saying it, or somebody in a group, when you differentiate your instruction, the people that are higher, so you give them more, you have to write 2 sentences because you're just learning how to do this. You get to write me 4. You give them different tasks that accomplish the same things, but challenge them at the level that they're at. Allowing the student to own the adaptive technique rather than just forcing it on them and outing them as being different. Just getting them involved, saying, I have something you can try. What do you think?
Can you talk about a little bit about how a teacher can support students who have the cognitive ability to produce language, but are not producing it or are producing it very slowly?
The slow learners. Okay, there are a couple ways that you can address slower learners. Again, differentiated instruction, putting groups of slower learners together when you're doing group activities, allowing them to go at their own pace, giving them less than their peers. Again, that culture of give me a minute, and knowing that you're going to give them a minute and not try and rush them, and letting this class respect that can be really helpful. Something that we've just started, now this is at the program level, and I know not everybody has this, and it is, I will grant, it has taken us years to get our directors on board to do this. We just opened up a CLB 2-3 slow class. And so it's still CLB, we still have to do assessments, we still have to do all the things, but the students know we're not hiding it. This is we are taking this at a slower pace on purpose. And so there are people who our seniors, because they really don't care about the reading and writing. They're not trying to get jobs, and they know that they're slower and they take longer to write. So we've got a bunch of seniors in the class. We've got students who've been floundering in regular classes because they can't keep up with their peers, that they've opted in to that. And just students who want a little bit more of a relaxed. So that's something we've fought for. And it is I've already seen the success in, and I've been fighting for it. So something like that is an option, because what you do is, especially if you have multiple sections, if you have multiple CLB whatever classes, CLB3, go to your administration and say, hey, could we designate one of these classes as this, and see if people would be willing. So there's that. The other thing that I like to do, especially when I'm finding like somebody is just not succeeding and there's some cognitive things going on that we're trying to find out, or we're trying to like tease out, is I like to have an interpreted meeting with that person to find out why they're in classes. Why are you here? What is your goal? Do you want employment, or do you just want community integration? Do you just want citizenship? What was learning like for you in your home culture? Like trying to just get more information about who they are, what their journey has been, what was their job before, and think about what cognitive requirements were for that job. So really having an earnest conversation, because the thing is, it's one thing if they've only been in class for a couple of months, but let's say that you've got this person, it's clear to you and everybody around you that there's something cognitive going on. They've been in the level for like a year and a half and nothing's happening. I guarantee you the student knows it too. It's not a surprise to them. And so when you come to them with an interpreter and you say, this just really seems hard. Tell me what you're thinking. What's easy? What's hard? Why do you think that is? Here are some ideas I have. What do you think about that? Right? Involve them. They're not unaware that they're struggling. And sometimes they want an out and they just don't know it. Like something that I said, in my presentation about the tiers, as part of getting that started, I spearheaded a leadership committee to put together a long-term learner policy. And that was to say, we will allow you to stay in class for 400 days, which is about 2 years. And if we do not see progress in any of the 4 skills in that time, we would like to transition you to a community-based program, because our link program is obviously not working for you. And so what we do is this is introduced to the students, to the entire student body in September and in January, at our major intake times. And we go over it. We do it when we do all the classroom expectations for PBLA. We go over the long-term learner policy and say, if you hit 400 and there is no progress, then this program is not helping you reach your language goals, right? Again, we bring it back on us. It's our fault. The program is not serving you. And so we need to find something else. Now, we're not just going to say, okay, go, you have 400 classes. No, at 200 in the policy, we have written at 200 days in class, which is approximately a year, give or take. If there's lack of progress and the teacher is concerned that there is something else going on, then they make a referral to me, and I will do some interventions with them. So at a year, it's like the check-in time for our teachers to say, okay, this student, because on our, just the way that our attendance software, we have a column that shows us how many days they've been in a level. So not just my class, but in this level. And so that's something that, at 200 days, we ask all the teachers to look down the line of their roster and tell us, okay, is this person slow and they're progressing slow but steady? Okay, that's not a problem. They're just slow. They're not progressing and your little spidey senses are going off. Okay, you need a referral to Jessica.
Okay.
Yeah. Jessica, I love how enthusiastic you are. I just love it. It just radiates through. And I think it makes me so excited. I want to go and try all of these things just because you're so enthusiastic about it. Kieran, I think we're at our time. So even though we obviously have more questions and could go on, Kieran, I think we do have to wrap up. Is that correct? You need to give us a little bit of next steps?
Yes. Thank you.
Sorry, I
Thank
know
you
I could
so much,
talk.
Jessica. This was absolutely fantastic. And as Lisa was saying, your passion really radiates out of you, and it's really inspiring. And then finally, just a huge thank you to the BC Safe Haven curriculum writers for organizing and supporting this training. And the biggest thank you to Jessica for her time and expertise. And finally, I just want to say thanks to everybody who joined us today. It was a pleasure to see you all and to discuss this very important topic in breakout rooms. So we respect and value the work that you do every day with refugee claimants here in BC and wish you a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thank you all.